Good, good.
Report it that way, so I've got that.
See, you've got this, you saw this letter here, didn't you? Well, this is in response to that letter.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 Planning Board meeting. It's officially 7 p.m. and we are underway. So this time I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie, I'm putting you on the spot, but would you mind leading us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this moment, I'd like to ask everyone to remain silent for a moment of reflection. Thank you. This time we'll bring up item number 2 to establish voting members. At this time, all regular members are present. Do we need a motion for, I think this is the first time we've had all the regular members present in a while. Do we need a motion to accept all regular members, or?
Second.
All in favor? Very good. Next item, number 3, is the additions or deletions to the agenda. We do have several here. I would like to make the motion that we have for item number 4, the approval of the agenda. Item number 5, the oath of office for myself, Mr. McNally, Mr. Berry, and Mr. McAteer. Item number 6, presentation of the award for Louis Philippi. Item number 7, approval of the minutes from the March 1st, 2022 meeting. Item number 8, subsection A, text amendments to table 25-1, table of allowed uses, section 30.190, wireless telecommunication facilities, and section 105, definitions. Subsection B, rezoning case number 2021-003, Creech, and subsection C, Union County 2050 Implementation Committee updates. For item number 9, the planning staff report. Item number 10, brief comments, and item number 11, adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we accept the agenda as just presented and what you read.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Thank you. This time, that covers item number 4, since we have approved the agenda. We have to move on to item number 5, oath of office. And for that, Lee, is this, or Amy, you got us there?
Y'all, I included it in your packet. If all 4 of you will just stand up and read it together.
All right.
In unison.
I, Daniel Berry, do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a member of the Union County Planning Board, so help me God.
I, Jonathan Thomas, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, that I will bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina, and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are established in the government thereof, and that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of my knowledge and ability, so help me God. I, Daniel Berry, swear that I will well and truly execute the duties of the office of a member of the Union County Planning Board,
according to the best of my skill and ability, according to the law, so help me God.
With that, I believe we are official.
I feel like I could have clapped.
Sorry for all the formalities. This is going to be probably my proudest and moment of the night, and one I've been looking forward to. It's a presentation of the award. This is for our former esteemed board member, Louis Philippi. And we're going to present to him this plaque on behalf of the county and the planning board. With our greatest appreciation, we hereby present Louis Philippi with this award of recognition for your years of commitment and dedicated service to the community through your efforts with the Union County Planning Board. Mr. Philippi, would you please step up here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we definitely. I remember how to come back here. Where's that go? Oh, in front, okay. I see, huh?
We're also retire your name tag.
Thank you, sir.
Because there is only one.
Get there. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor to serve this county. I'm moving to Florida, but I'll never forget this place. I've been here for 52 years, and it's got a place in my heart until I go to my grave. Thank you so much. And gentlemen,
Louis, thank you for your service.
congratulations. All right, gentlemen, be sure to do a good job while I'm gone.
It'll be on YouTube.
Okay,
You can always
I'll be
watch it.
checking on you.
Okay, all right.
Now, with all the fun out of the way, we'll move on to item number 7, the approval of minutes for the March 1st, 2022 meeting. At this time, please review the minutes, and once you've done so, if we could have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second from Mr. Fisher? All in favor? So moved. Item number 8.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, before we go any further, I want to thank Amy for including the letter in our booklet here that, where we was discussed and some comments were made that we discussed heavily at the end of that last meeting. So it is in here as a matter of record, what the letter said and the words that were used. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All right, agenda item number 8, subsection A, text amendments to table 25-1, table of allowed uses, section 30.190, wireless telecommunication facilities, and section 105, definitions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Board of Planning Board for Union County. I see a lot of familiar faces, but I also see some new faces. So let me introduce myself. My name is Jim King. I'm the other senior planner with Union County. My focus is on current planning. I'm also the zoning administrator, so I manage the zoning court process for the county, which includes administration, interpretation, enforcement of the zoning ordinance. So with that, I will give a brief introduction to the text amendment for tonight. So this is multiple text amendments, but it's all for wireless communication facilities. This is a text amendment that was initiated by a citizen body, citizens from the Amber Meadows Homeowners Association and the Tullamore Homeowners Association. Thank you. And just to kind of give you a brief background, our current ordinance talks about setbacks, and setbacks are based on the engineered fall zone. Also in the current ordinance, which we don't have, but we previously had in the old land use ordinance, which was predated the current Union County Development Ordinance, there was setbacks to residential districts, which did not carry forward. So we had some residents that were concerned about this engineered fall zone, because if an engineer says, well, it's got a 0 engineered fall zone, then there's a 0 setback for that tower off the property line. They felt like that was not feasible. So they wanted to make a proposal to something that they felt would be more safe to the public safety and welfare for all citizens of Union County, as well as to add some clarity to the ordinance by modifying and adding some definitions. And also, through this text amendment, hopefully it would bring wireless cell towers more in harmony with the surrounding area. So just a real quick overview. There's 5 sections that they're looking at amending. The first section is to table 25, which is our table of permitted uses. Basically what they've done there is they've amended certain tower types as far as whether it's required a special use permit, if it's allowed by right. They did not mess with any of the sections where it would prohibit a tower from a certain zoning district, but in certain cases, it may now require a special use permit. The second section in question where the modification was to section 30.190, which is in our supplemental use requirements for wireless telecommunication facilities. Here, they wanted to give clarity to the setbacks, increase the setback based on tower height, and also to add a section in there to add a setback off of our zoning districts or our residential zoning districts, which would be like the R40, the R20, R10, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The next 2 modifications are both to definitions, where they're modifying, 1, the definition for concealed wireless facility, and 2, they're modifying the definition for the fall zone. And then the last text amendment would be a modification. Basically, they're adding a definition for a wireless support structure height. These next 2 slides I've included. These are the actual proposed text amendments. I am going to actually skip over these 2 slides. I've put these in there for the courtesy of the applicant, so if they want to reference them, they are here. And I will move straight on into the recommendation. Because of proposed text amendments do bring the current ordinance back in line with what was previously in effect prior to the Union County Development Ordinance under the old land use ordinance. It did have a provision in there for setbacks for every foot of tower height would be a foot setback off the property line. We also had in there that there is a provision of a setback off the for a residential structure on an adjacent property. They've modified that a little bit to say, well, let's make that setback off the actual zoning district instead of just the residential structure on that zoning district. The other modifications as far as modifying the 2 definition and adding the definition, that gives clarity to the ordinance and makes it easier to interpret. So with that, staff supports this recommendation or this request, and staff's recommendation is that this board will make a favorable recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for approval of this text amendment. Staff is available for any questions that the board has, but I would like to, this time, turn it over to the applicant so that they can kind of dig down more in the nitty-gritty and explain their basis of making these proposed text amendments.
Thank you, Mr. King. Does any board member have any questions for Mr. King at this time?
Can you give us a little history on how did it change from the LDO to the UDO? I mean, how did all those things just not carry over?
Well, the cell tower industry is constantly changing. We actually had hired a consultant to write the ordinance. This was something that was commonly found in other zoning ordinances. If I'm not mistaken, Lee, please correct me, the consultant was from up in Ohio or something like that? Chicago. Where this was more of a common practice. It's a more urbanized area. It's not as rural as the county. So, you know, they propose those changes for the current ordinance. We vetted them through the planning board and various steering committees. There was nothing trying to undermine the previous ordinance. It was kind of what current trends were leading towards at the time.
Okay, thank you.
This time I'd like to call the applicant up here. Keep in mind, now, Lee, you're going to have to clarify this for me, but as an applicant, they're not restricted 3 minutes, are they? Okay, so do as you may.
Thank you for that. I've done the 3-minute thing, and it's hard to do. You want to do it from there? You want a chair?
No, I got it.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Gary Vale. I'm a resident of Amber Meadows, which is over in the Marvin area. I serve on the board there. And this lady next to me is named Tanya McCauley. She's also on the board and president of the board of Tullamore. Together, we co-chaired a working group that put together the requests that we're going to talk about tonight a little bit. And this group, I will tell you, has put a lot of man hours into research and working these things up. And it's been in the process for a while. So we'll go from there. We'll try not to bury in zoning things that we don't know enough about that you probably know too much about. But we'll try to cover the bases of these 5 requests that we want to make. As some of you are aware, our group, the working group, has had reason to become interested and involved in the siting of cell towers in Union County and the process that you go through when you do that. Our review of the industry, the cell tower industry, and of the Union County UDO ordinances has brought us to the conclusion that Union County residents would probably benefit from some amendments to that language that we think would better protect the interests of the residents and the property adjacent to a proposed cell tower. Consequently, we filed an application, as Jim said, we filed an application, put it together, and requested 5 amendment changes. They are focused solely for the purpose of safety of residents and protection of property. We did it in that way, and that's what those 5 are intended to do. This evening, I'll outline those 5, and I'll provide an explanation as to why we are making each request. And each of these requests is limited to cell tower location. The current UDO language for setbacks for wireless structures is as I think you see on your screens. It says, except as otherwise expressly stated, a wireless support structure must be set back from all property lines a distance that is at least equal to its engineered fall zone. And that's in red for a reason. We're going to come back and talk about fall zones in a minute and what effect they have on your setback. Our first request is that the current setback language be replaced with the language that you now see. All wireless support structures would have a minimum setback requirement of 1 foot for each 1 foot of structure height from all abutting property lines. It's commonly called a 1-to-1 setback height requirement, and it's based solely proportionally to the cell tower that we're talking about, which range all the way up to a couple hundred, 300 feet. So that's what it's meant to do. It's a 1-to-1 setback requirement to make space for that cell tower if anything were to happen. Why would we make this change? We make this change for three reasons, but one reason is that we know that bad things do occasionally happen to cell towers. Cell towers occasionally fall, not often, thank God. They can burn, which is usually started from maintenance at the base of them. We have seen that tornadoes can totally destroy cell towers. That's happened in Alabama and those areas that have recently had the very bad storms. Setbacks can be based on fall zones, but those fall zones vary. And if you start researching across the country and across your own municipality here in Union County, we see that fall zones can be as little as 50 feet. We saw one that was 50 feet. It happened to be 50 feet from the back fence of a daycare center. That concerned us more than I can say. Anyway, we strongly feel that any amount of fall zone less than tower height does not provide an adequate buffer for the safety and public welfare that Union County and we are seeking. Another issue with the current UDO setback language is that it refers to and requires that we give total credibility to these engineered fall zones. We know that there can be problems with engineered fall zones. The testing we have seen, for example, involved wind speeds up to 112 mile per hour. 112 mile per hour is barely an F1 tornado. Tornadoes go all the way to F5 and winds go all the way to 300 plus mile per hour. The testing was done at 112 mile per hour. We're not sure that's adequate. The testing also did not contemplate any wind resistance that might be created by the antenna array that they hang on top of the towers. We think there would definitely be some consideration given in that and some effect on their ultimate prediction in the fall zone. Engineering certifications for fall zones also do not deal with the effect of accidents and maintenance errors. Every now and then, if you look at that picture that's up there, you see a guy in a bucket and he's working on a cell tower. Actually, this guy doesn't have a bucket, our other picture did. But they have to replace parts, they have to get up there, they have to maintain them. Fall zones deals purely with structural collapse. They don't deal with maintenance like drop tools, God forbid a worker fall, pieces of replacement parts falling, anything that can fall down within that fall zone and be contained. They also do not anticipate other objects falling from above, which we've seen in various online things, which ice can form on those things and sheets off, just like it does off of a roof in New York City, and when it does, it floats sideways. Engineered fall zones ask us to look at the height of the tower and the fall zone they predict and basically say everything you see up there will be contained within that tower. And it's not quite that simple because they believe that they've engineered a way that it won't fall directly outward. But with tornadoes and some of these things, it's difficult to predict that. By contrast, we went back and reviewed the pre-2014 UDO language that Jim referenced a minute ago. And its objective was ensuring wireless tower safety as well. Before it was revised in 2014, the UDO did contain a one-for-one setback language. It was in that earlier version. We believe that language was warranted then, and we believe it's still warranted now. We have provided several examples for the planning board staff and for the board itself in our packet that we put together from other North Carolina municipalities, and a lot of them mirror that one-to-one requirement. Some ask for more than that. They do one-to-one height plus 2%, 1%, whatever. In short, we believe that any abutting property should have a safety buffer of at least the height of the tower, and the way to ensure that, just have setback language that says you need at least a one-to-one setback rule. Our second request is insertion of language that you now see that says all wireless support structures would have a setback requirement of 300 feet from all R-zoned property lines. This is a little different because it has to do with R-zoned property lines only, and it's a bigger setback. Part of the reason for that is that despite numbers and comparisons of sales numbers that you're going to see in some of the impact studies that are put together by cell phone builders usually, the purchase of a house is to some degree driven by emotion. That's just the way it is. The National Association of Realtors conducted a survey that showed that 94% of buyers would pay less for a house that was close to a cell tower. 79% of the people who were part of the survey said they wouldn't buy a house at all if it were a few blocks from a cell tower. Sale of residential real estate often supports the old adage that perception is reality. It just is. First impressions do matter. Current UDO language would allow location of a tower as close as 50 feet from a residential property line if that's what the fall zone said it was going to be. And it could look something like that. These are not exactly proportionate distances, but you get the general idea. A setback of 300 feet would provide a much more realistic spacing. We also have a current example on Newtown Road where a fall tower is set in the corner of an industrial parcel, which is perfectly legal and is permitted by right. And right behind it is a section of property that happens to contain $1 million plus residential home sites. It can happen. It's happened in Union County already. Our Third Amendment request is to clarify the definition that's already in the UDO for a concealed wireless facility. It currently says, for the purpose of administering and interpreting the wireless telecommunication facility regulations of Section 30.190, this term means any wireless facility that is integrated as an architectural feature of an existing structure. And then what's in red is what it goes on to say, and our problem with it, or any new wireless support structure designed to camouflage or conceal the presence of antennas or towers so that the purpose of the facility or wireless support structure is not readily apparent to a casual observer. We would suggest, and we'll show you a slide in a second, to just what's in red we're going to take out, and we're going to deal with concealed towers as one thing, and anything else, including camouflage towers, as something totally different. We think there's a clear difference between the two primarily because camouflage towers is purely cosmetic. It doesn't have anything to do with the fall characteristics of a tower. It doesn't have anything and no relativity to public safety. So we think they should be, camouflage towers we think should be treated just like any other tower. What you see now here is what a true concealed wireless support structure is, and you'll understand why we feel pretty good about having that wording included. They are literally part and integrated into an architectural building. These are camouflage towers, and as I said, we think these towers that are designed to camouflage should be differentiated from true concealed towers. They're totally different animals. They are freestanding towers and should be treated as such. So we believe that a concealed tower, as is done in Table 25, and we'll get there in a minute, a concealed tower, truly concealed and part of an architectural structure, an integrated part of an architectural structure, should and can be in some instances permitted by right. We have no problem with that. We have a problem with the camouflage piece of that definition. We think that camouflage towers and all other towers, aside from concealed, should require a special use permit if being requested in R zones or in zones O and B2, which are light office use. These towers may ultimately be permitted, but if they are done on a special permit basis, at least there will be oversight. The Board of Adjustment at least will have a chance to look at it and have the latitude to make adjustments that they think are advisable or necessary for public safety or other reasons. But doing that with an S gives them the right to look at it. If those things are permitted by right, nobody looks at it. The fourth change would be to update Table 25.1 to reflect these changes by saying wireless support structures other than concealed, even if less than 60 feet in height, would require a special use permit. And as I said, rather than be permitted by right, if they're in zones other than those zones. There was really no other changes suggested for 25.1. So basically, we've taken and split the definition of concealed, and we've split it up, taken out the camouflage, and made two different things out of it. A fourth change then would be to update Table 25.1, which is done as shown. We've taken the areas where, in the R-zoned areas, where they would have been permitted, that is, permitted by right, and we have made those S's, which are special permit requests, which means that the Board of Adjustment or somebody's going to get a shot at them as far as looking at them and advising on them. The fourth change, well, we did the fourth change. The fifth change and the last change then is a new change. We would like to insert a definition of height as respects to wireless support structures. And it would read, wireless support structure height would be defined as the vertical distance measured from the ground to the uppermost part of the tower, including any antennas and lightning rods. The reason for this is, in the current UDO, there is no definition of height. It's just simply not addressed. And that leaves latitude, if you're talking about setbacks or other UDO language, you have a lack of clarity of what you really mean about a height. And you'll see different applications made where they will stipulate that the height includes a lightning rod or doesn't include a lightning rod. But rather than deal with that uncertainty, we've said, okay, let's make this clear. We'll put a definition of height in there that includes any ancillary equipment on top, and then we all know what everybody's talking about. It's simply a definition that's not there now that we think should be there now. Thank you. In closing, we don't suggest that these modifications are going to create a complete and perfect document. We do think they go some way. I mean, how many of us have done things where sometime later we looked at what we did and you said, you know, I'm not sure why we did that. There were some things in the pre-2014 language that we think should still be in there, and we think those should be readopted in the current UDO language. We also believe that these changes will help clarify and simplify tower siting discussions, and that we truly believe they will provide an increased amount of public safety and property protection, which is the direction we're headed. Thank you for the opportunity to explain these. I'll be happy to answer questions anybody has or furnish additional information if any is required or needed.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah.
You used the word property. You also mentioned about the daycare center, which is a business. So are you including businesses in your definition of property, or is
Yes.
it property just homeowners?
It depends a little bit on the piece of the language you're speaking about. As far as the setback itself goes, the one-for-one setback, that's any property line. One-for-one setback from any property line.
Okay.
The 300-foot setback applied only to R-zoned properties.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the applicant?
Anything else?
Thank you. At this time, we would normally open it up for public comments. I do not see anyone from the public on the sign-up sheet. Is there anyone that wishes to speak for or against this proposed language change that has not signed up? Thank you. This time, I'd like to open it up for a board discussion.
I had a question about, I wasn't clear in the third section about the fall zone. We changed the language from wireless telecommunication facility to radio or television broadcast tower. I'm not sure why we did that, or why you proposed that.
There is a separate section under the supplemental regulations that addresses radio and broadcast towers. There too are supports, wireless support structures. So that's why that change was in there, was to make sure that it was addressed in conjunction with those wireless support towers for telecommunications.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if you don't mind. And thank you for this. I think we're on the right track. But if we can talk about concealed architectural structures versus concealed standalone towers, I want to make sure that I understand, if if a church steeple wants to get paid some money to put cell towers inside their steeples, which is very popular in Mecklenburg County, as a matter of fact, we don't want to eliminate the ability of a freestanding structure from doing that. This is the tower that's masked as a pine tree,
Correct.
not having it abut a residential neighborhood or
Yeah.
on a residential property line that we,
The cross you see out there on Providence Road behind
that's
the
at
Methodist
Weddington
Church,
Methodist is a great example.
that would be allowed as a concealed tower.
Is the, did anybody talk to engineers about this one for one? You know, a lot of these towers are built with breakpoints in them so that they're, when the wind hits 300, like you were talking about, they're built to come down. So they snap at a certain height rather than the whole thing coming.
There have been presentations at previous Board of Adjustment cases where the board has asked that particular question. And the way the engineer had explained it to the Board of Adjustment is, as you said, there's breaking points in that tower, so the whole tower doesn't collapse. Certain sections of that tower are designed to collapse. But again, to get to the applicant's point, those are under common circumstances of, situations where wind velocities of 112 miles an hour or less. I'm not an engineer, so I really can't speak to that, but I can presume that if a 300 mile an hour wind came and blew that tower enough that that breaking point that's supposed to hinge may break all the way through and carry away further. But that's just an assumption. And I think that's the same assumption that the applicants had, is, you want to rely on the engineer, but what happens if the engineer's incorrect?
Thank you.
To the point of a 300-mile-per-hour wind, I believe if you had a tornado of that magnitude, a tower coming down might be the least of your concerns.
Mr. Chairman, some of us are old enough to remember when Hugo blew through here.
I do as well, Mr. Berry. You have a very good point.
Steeples listed in a lot of facilities, particularly in Charlotte, had the damage. I don't disagree with the applicant's desire. I'm wondering, though, if the constraint we're putting could create limitations downline. Are we regulating for something and we got an unintended consequence coming at us? That I support what you're trying to do, but we just doubled the cost of cell towers, right? Because of the amount of acreage that's going to be required to build a 300-foot tower is now 600 feet, right? Somebody else is smarter than me can figure out how much property we're talking about, but
I will say this much. Our staff tries to weigh out both sides of the story. Lee is a great person in being the devil's advocate and trying to come from the opposite end and testing us on this stuff. I've been in this business for 24 years, and there is no correct answer. I can tell you, after codifying 6 different zoning ordinances, we will tell our governing board the night of adoption, be prepared for this next year. We're going to be in front of you a whole lot amending this thing, because once you put boots on the ground, you figure out what you put in there just does not work.
thank you.
I personally don't see any issues with their proposing. To Mr. Berry's point, should there be unintended consequences that we're not aware of this evening that may rear their ugly heads later, then I think it'd be appropriate and justified to bring that back up to the board. Are there any other unintended consequences you would be
I
concerned?
just wanted to make sure I understood the architectural concealment.
Understood. I see no issues with this. My thought process, it appears as though staff is recommending everything that the applicant has proposed. They've taken no exceptions. I'm in favor of approving this. Any other discussion, or do we have a motion?
The only thing I was thinking of is if what Mr. Berry is saying is true and we've increased the cost of the construction of these towers, yet these towers can be concealed in existing structures. I'm okay with that, because that's kind of like when we were talking about the solar powers before, solar power panels. You know, we have a lot of roof structures that can handle a lot of solar panels, and that should be utilized as built objects already. And the same thing perhaps with cell towers is that if we have architectural structures that can support that, well, we should encourage that, because it's there already, versus a freestanding structure out in a neighborhood somewhere. That's my
Thank you.
thought.
Ms. Duda?
I just have one comment. The UDO is meant to be a living, breathing document. It's not supposed to be something that's static. And it's obvious that in 2014, there was some good parts and maybe not so good parts. And, you know, we always want to correct and make sure we get the best parts of everything. And as we move forward, going into 2050, I mean, here we are 2021, or 2022, look at me, I'm already a year behind. I lost it because of the pandemic. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we're doing the best we can to prepare for 2050. Right now, this is the best solution that we're seeing based on the technology age that's before us. We're going 5G right now. Who knows where we're going to be 10 years from now? So if we treat this UDO as being a living document and it's not a static, what I would suggest is I think this is a great presentation for what we are today. 5 years, 10 years from now, somebody else will be in front of us 5, 10 years from now to say, hey, we need to tweak it a little bit more to be a living document for what we're dealing with 10 years from now. So I would approve this because I think it makes sense for the safety of the community, just because of some historical stuff that's already happened. And I think they did a great job in presenting. It was very clear, it was very succinct and concise, and I'm for it.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I think when you change it so that your setbacks in a R zoned area are 300 feet, you're just eliminating cell towers in those areas altogether, unless they're concealed. And then you want to have a special use on all concealed ones. And so you get it where, in order to have, and the concealed ones are probably going to have, you're going to need more of them in order to get the same kind of coverage, the same area. Just depends on whether you want everything residential in that county or not.
You know, but between your point, Charlie, as well as Mr. Berry's, that does bring up a very valid question to me. Does that apply to RA zoning? And the reason I ask is, as I drive in the more rural areas of the county, there are a number of towers and farms, and that would more or less preclude towers in those areas in general.
The proposed text is focused on, again, the properties that are zoned like R40, R20, R10, R15. Your more urban type of zonings, the 300-foot setback does not apply to your RA districts. So RA 200, RA 40, RA 20 is could be the one-for-one tower height off the property line.
Thank you. And you already had that, the applicant already had that down, so I appreciate that clarification. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. King, is there any follow-up that we need to discuss with the applicant, or?
Not at this time. The next step is taken into the Board of County Commissioners. They move forward with approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings up our next item, which is Agenda Item 8, Subsection B, rezoning case 2021-003, Creech. Good evening, Bjorn.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If you'll indulge me for a minute, we have the go-to meeting up because we have one of our committee chairmen from our implementation committees who can't be here in person, and he said that he's tried to get into the meeting and it's not working, so I'm gonna close this out and open it back up.
On this particular matter that's about to come up, I have current business dealings with True Homes, so I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Do we have a motion for Mr. McAteer to recuse himself? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Consider yourself recused.
Replace him.
Good job for first meeting.
Replace him before we vote on this particular thing. With the-
Well, that worked, because I see Josh Allen popping up. All right, that's great.
It has been brought to my attention that we can appoint an alternate in this instance to bring it to an odd number. To that end, I believe Mr. Patrick has been sitting out for a while. I'd like to make a motion to allow Mr. Patrick to be our alternate for this vote. All in favor?
All right, thank you, members of the planning board. This is case CZ 2021-003, called the Creech rezoning. Property is owned by the Creech family. This is a request to rezone a little more than 71 acres in the Marshville Township. It's immediately adjacent to Wingate, but it is across the property line in Marshville Township, from RA 40 to R6 with conditions in order to develop a residential subdivision. I believe it's 134 lots total. We have a site plan, it's a conditional rezoning. I'll get into the site plan in a moment. Some of the lots are outside of the contiguous subdivision itself. They're essentially along existing roads, so we've asked that they not be a part of the homeowner association, that should be sold off as individual lots, so that's a note. This will be served with water and sewer, so one of the conditions was for the sewer system to be designed to be gravity lines only. Consideration for ongoing expense related to the system maintenance as opposed to force mains. And there was a traffic impact analysis that was conducted for the development. The improvements that were agreed to involve a left turn lane into the site as well as an intersection immediately north. It's a 5-point intersection with identified safety issues, and this intersection would get an all-way stop design, including rumble strips and signage for an all-way stop at that intersection, which is something the NCDOT supports. This is the site plan. It's immediately northeast of Wingate. Actually, this subdivision here is inside of Wingate, so this development would connect into it. This section down here was recently approved as an extension of this development, so there would be 2 points of access, both for them and for this site. Tree save, open space area preserved over here with access points along the existing roads to be able to get into the common area. Turn lane here at this access point opposite of Taylor Street. Existing conditions, you have some agricultural, single-family residential, and subdivisions, and as well as large lot residential. Adjacent municipalities, again, Wingate is immediately to the south. Development status, you have a combination of undeveloped land, subdivisions that have been developed, the hashed areas is open space, and then existing development to the north that was developed years ago as single-family residential. In terms of environmental features, there is a blue line stream on the eastern edge of the site, and that's where the open space protected undeveloped land is focused for this development. Otherwise, it's a combination of pasture land and forested land. In terms of zoning, we took a clip from the GoMap site because often it's complicated trying to include municipal zoning information and the county's information. So this area is a combination of RA 40, some R20, RA 20, some conditionally zoned property to the north, R6, which is a mobile home park. In terms of transportation, the road only carries about 1,300 cars a day. That's expected to increase in the future. The Monroe Expressway is immediately to the south, which is impacting development trends in the area. And this is the 5-way intersection where an all-way stop project would be funded. Otherwise, there are no funded improvements in the area. In terms of the land use plan, we actually have 2 maps to present on the land use map section of the presentation. The first one is because this was submitted before the Union County 2050 plan was adopted. So at the time, they were submitting under the 2014 plan, which had this area identified as mixed residential, which allows for a range of uses from apartments all the way down to patio homes, smaller lot, single-family residential. Under the current plan, 2050 plan, there was a much harder line for rural areas transitioning away, even where utilities were present. We have committees that will actually be presenting shortly after this presentation to talk about how they're wrestling with that issue. Sometimes there are utilities in the area, and based on current planning initiatives, maybe they don't want that area to develop in a fully urban manner, and maybe it would just be clustered. This development is a hybrid of that because it does have a lot of protected open space with an R6 lot size, so there is a significant percent that is preserved open space, but the 2050 plan does identify this area as rural residential. In terms of public feedback, a community meeting was held actually last summer. No residents attended the meeting, just a representative from Wingate, myself, and the developer. There were no proposed changes based on that, and we haven't received any phone calls or letters since then either from the public. We do have municipal feedback from the town of Wingate. They would prefer annexation and concern over utility capacity due to development in the unincorporated area, which would ultimately all be treated by the city of Monroe. So in terms of staff report recommendation, the negatives, it's not annexing into Wingate and will add traffic to nearby roads. However, the positives are they are mitigating the traffic impacts, and the site can be served with utilities, and it is consistent with the land use map that they submitted under. So therefore, we are recommending approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is here to present as well immediately after me. Yes, sir.
Question, did you say that the annexation, the town wanted to annex it?
They would rather the development occurred within the town, yes.
They would like to annex it. Is that right?
I'll defer to Wingate on, because that question of can versus would like to, kind of a different question. So
I don't think I'm misreading this, but we were handed tonight a letter dated April 5th, 2022 to this board, signed by a Keith Finn, market partner of True Homes.
Yes.
And he says, in the beginning, we consulted with Wingate and learned that annexation was not an option due to legislative caps, thus prompting an application for rezoning in Union County. Later, we tried to file an application for annexation and rezoning at their request during a community meeting, which was not accepted by the town. I mean, this is like a circle going around. So and then you got what it says over here in the Wingate letter. I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, they're both true. I mean, the town is growing. They have approved hundreds of units of residential in the last year or two. And this area is growing. They have approved a development immediately adjacent to this that was within the town.
Okay.
So given the opportunity to have development that's within their boundaries, they would want it to be that way. Now, whether this specific product, the way it is configured, is what they would want to annex, isn't necessarily a true statement. But if development were to occur on this property that was consistent with their land use plans and development standards, and they had the authority to annex it, they would do so. They would entertain that.
Thank you, Bjorn. Appreciate the explanation.
When I was reading through the materials earlier, I noticed the letter of intent by the builder is using gross acreage. What would the totals be if it was buildable, if it was net buildable?
You mean the density? The site acreage is 70 acres. The area in common open space is 32. So, and then you have some right-of-way as well. So, approximately half that. The overall development density is 1.91. So if you were to have, say half that, you'd be talking significantly more than the 1.9. But, the specific calculation in terms of
It would double it, though.
the layout, yeah.
It's 2.1, it would be times 2 or times 1.75, so you're looking more kind of 3.8 per acre. I'm just bringing that up
Off
only
the top of
because of
your
the
head,
gross
yes.
versus, I'm just
That's
doing the
correct.
math. So that's another consideration, only because Union County is doing net buildable. I was concerned to see why it's going gross.
Mhm.
Bjorn, do we have any school information for this site?
We did. We received information from the school system. It's in your staff report. Talks about how there is X number of units that have been approved in the school cluster, which is Forest Hills, and that schools were adequate with the approved development.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bjorn at this time?
Yeah. Who did you say was going to look after the sewer on this, Bjorn?
This would be Union County's facilities.
Okay, you had said City of
Infrastructure.
Monroe.
Well, it's treated. It flows back. We have an agreement with the city of Monroe, as does Wingate, to have the wastewater from this part of the county flow to City of Monroe treatment facilities, which we have a cap, as does Wingate, for how much can actually be served by them.
So there's an east and west side for sewer
And a north side.
and a north side? And there's,
And then a far north, if you include our package plans.
so the west side is capped. There's no more sewer left.
Honestly, it depends on which day you ask that question and what the answer is, or whether it's capped or not.
Not the flushes.
I mean, things that I've heard,
Yeah.
that there's no more capacity for sewer water for the west side. But yet the east side still has, and the north, and
It depends
extending
on how,
north.
it depends on how I ask that question, because if you're, depending on where you are in the line, even though you're not built yet,
Right.
you may be entitled. But if you're too far down the line, you may not be entitled.
Okay.
So yes, stuff is obviously, things are still coming online in the western part of the county.
If I can, because I know where
I
you're
got
going.
I got one more question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Do you know how many houses you said there were developments around there. Do you know how many houses total are around there, roughly?
Well, there's not much going on in Marshville. It's overwhelmingly in Wingate or
But I
unincorporated
mean,
Union County.
Where this is being built, there's all developments around it.
That's correct.
Do you know how many houses are built in those areas,
600?
roughly?
We have the town of Wingate here who can give the correct up-to-date information. My estimate is that it's about 600, but
Okay.
they're here to be able to answer questions as well, if that's relevant.
Okay, thank you.
Bjorn, how does one queue up to be in line for the sewer availability?
Get an approved plan, pay your fees.
Okay?
It's a little bit of a complicated process. I mean, for folks that don't, I guess, work in, there's a there are a series of plans that have to be submitted. Of course, you have to go through whatever various board, if you get the town, you get the county, so you have to get approval there. You have to submit a sketch plan to the county, the county reviews that. Then you submit your construction drawings, the county reviews those. As long as those are approved, then you can move to, and when the county approves it, and when they're reviewing it, they have an idea of how much capacity is left. So they're sort of temporarily reserving that capacity while they're reviewing it. And then ultimately, once the construction documents are approved, you get to the point where you can pay capacity. You get permitted. Permit actually comes from the state of North Carolina. We're not self-permitting. So they look, they review it again to make sure that we have the capacity we say we do. And then ultimately, the final plat, so you do development phases, and you pay those capacity fees. And that's a simplified answer.
Mr. Berry, did you have a question for Bjorn?
Yeah, quickly, and I'm looking at you, but anybody can answer this question as the new boy here, that we're going to approve or not approve recommending this development. Has the city of Monroe agreed to accept the volume?
It's under our permit, so we
So
have.
we can assign their
Yes.
capacity.
We have a contract for.
I just was asking.
Yeah, we have the contract for the capacity, and how we approve development is up to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Bjorn? All right, thank you, Bjorn. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant. Hey, good evening.
Good evening, Chair and fellow board, planning board folks. Appreciate you giving the opportunity to present our rezoning case before you. It's been quite a ride. We, as per my letter, when we first put this property under contract, we knew that we were adjacent to Wingate, and we already knew the philosophy of Union County going for annexation. So that was our first go-to. So we did approach Wingate, and at the time, they had a legislative cap for annexations. So the acreage that we were bringing to the table did not fit the amount that they still had allocated. So there was no way to even move forward with that annexation. So as a result of that, we turned to Union County, and we did our formal application through Union County. And part of that, as you may know, is there's a neighborhood meeting. We conducted the neighborhood meeting, and as you saw in the slide presentation, we had no attendees other than Bjorn, myself, my consultant, and the town of Wingate, the mayor, as well as the town manager. And we had an open discussion, and that's when we learned that they had a legislative change 2 weeks prior to our neighborhood meeting that opened up that annexation. So then we called for a meeting, and I personally went and I met with the town manager and the mayor and just said, hey, I want to get a read for where you guys are at with this project. I want to have an understanding, if I go through this process, where do you sit? What is your mindset? They explicitly said they didn't want my development there. So kind of knowing and understanding, having worked with the town of Wingate for the past 2 years on a previous project, I had my plan B, which was, all right, if you guys aren't going to accept my application, then that means I'm going back to Union County for rezoning. Will you at least give me a recommendation? And in that discussion, the recommendation was, we will if you go back to the project that we previously rezoned and approved for you and make modifications to that, which I found a little disconcerting to open up a project that was previously approved. But I was willing to, and I conceded, and the agreement or the arrangement that was made, the negotiations, if you will, was to change our homes to cement siding, fiber cement siding versus vinyl. So we said, well, we're happy to do that. as long as you guys give us that recommendation. The only caveat I threw on the table to that was, if we concede on that, we just have to make sure that the sequence of events follows through. And what I mean by that is, if I do not get the rezoning in Union County, then you therefore do not get the fiber cement siding. It has to be a win-win, equitable situation. To which the response was, no, we want it either way. So I didn't feel that that was a fair approach, and we kind of just went our separate ways. And I decided to continue, and that's when I reached out to Bjorn. I said, Bjorn, I'd like to continue with the rezoning through Union County. I feel that we have a very solid plan here. We are completely synergistic with the property just below us. If I can, what's the best way to, how do I get to the next slide here? Oh, it's not on here. You have the site plan up?
That's on the other slide, Sean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you'd have to toggle between if you wanted to do that.
Perfect, okay. So just to the south of this is the project that I'm referring to, that as we tie into it, we are going to be building homes in that. It is under development today. And if we get this rezoning, it would be one homogeneous neighborhood. No one would know the difference as you drive through this neighborhood, that there's a property line or a Union County line, if you will. It would seem as one homogeneous community, and that's our intention here. In addition to that, we're providing a secondary access point for that development below, which when I was going through the developer's agreement for that property, the request or the concern at the time was emergency vehicle access. So I am now providing that emergency vehicle access for that secondary point. And in addition to that, we were requested by Union County Public Works to ensure that we had no pump station. They didn't want to take over another pump station. They didn't want the maintenance and the burden of a pump station. So I had my engineers look at the possibilities of how can I make this thing work without a pump station. Behind the scenes, we have to move and import a lot of dirt to build it up in order for the gravity to work. So the development cost is going to be a little bit higher than I would have expected, but I can at the end of the day make it work. And therefore, once we have proven that, and that's the utility plan that's also in your packet. Once we had proven that to the Public Works, then they gave us the green light. And they said, okay, that we'll accept. We have the capacity. You're not burdening us with a pump station. We're okay with that. Meanwhile, we flip to DOT. DOT says, well, for the entrance of this location off of our road, we want that lined up with the street across, which is Thomas. That's very typical in most neighborhoods for DOT criteria, just lining up intersections, if you will. And you already saw the reference to some of the improvements, which we have no problem making those improvements. That's pretty common. The traffic count, to be honest with you, is kind of below the threshold of warranting some of those improvements, but we don't have a problem putting those improvements in. So that's kind of where we sit as a project. And lastly, if I can reference, a very important thing here is we are, quote unquote, sacrificing almost half of this land to complete green space, open space. We're not going to develop that, ever. We're not going to come back. We can't. It's all part of the homogeneous parcel. So we got 70 acres there, of which 32 acres we will never touch. It will remain green open space. So we've designed this purposely, clustering it, if you will, and we're still at a relatively low density. We're at 1.9. The density below us is 2.7, so it's even higher. So we, at this point, don't understand the objection that Town of Wingate has. The only speculation I can have for them wanting us to annex is so they can deny us. That's my interpretation of that. I see no other reason. But we've checked all the boxes here. We really are making a concerted effort. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Questions for the applicant at this time?
Just to clarify, your building immediately south in Wingate?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's the development you referred to with the different siding and that sort of thing?
Yes, that's exactly correct. Correct, yeah. That is currently being developed, so the houses have not started yet. We're still doing all the infrastructure, things of that nature. And part of that is a side reference. When we were, it's kind of related but not related, but I think it's important for the board to know the stance that Town of Wingate has taken with us in that rezoning process. The project to the left of that, which is Glencroft, we had nothing to do with that project. But the request was, or part of the negotiations in the developers agreement was to repave the entire community, which we conceded to the tune of $250,000, if not, at the time it was $250,000 because it was 2 years ago, but everything's gone up. In addition to that, we are building a passive park in that section, which we have nothing to do with. So we feel like we're given a lot here, and we're just not catching a break with the Town of Wingate. Not sure exactly what the problems may or may not be. There was another reference to the development, in those conversations that I had with the town manager and the mayor. One of the references was, well, we're not looking to develop there. I'm like, well, you're not developing it, I'm developing it. We want to focus on the middle part of our town. And I don't know if that's a valid reason or not, but developments happen arbitrarily anywhere that there's an opportunity to develop, irrespective of the specific location of a parcel of land. So, anyways, that's kind of where I sit, that's where I am. I don't know if there's any other questions. Yes, sir.
Is there any berming or screening on any of these houses along the main road?
Yes, we typically will berm. In some cases, we'll put fencing in addition to the berm and landscaping. Yes.
How high, how much, you said you had to bring in dirt. What's the level of dirt that you have to bring in?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I apologize. I can find that for you if you need.
No, I was just curious on how much it takes to run, because you have to run the gravity feed for it.
Right, and it's only on the back portion where I'm connecting. In other words, if I chose to, I could create a cul-de-sac there, not connect it, and I don't have to bring in more dirt. But from my perspective, I would rather connect. I'm providing an emergency access. I'm creating one synergistic community, so it just makes sense. So I'm willing to do that. Obviously, I'm gaining some lots in the process, so that hopefully offsets it.
I apologize if you've already done this, but I didn't catch it. Could you please state your name for the record?
Sorry, I did not. Keith Fenn with True Homes.
Thank you, Mr. Fenn.
Sure.
I've got two questions, I suppose. The site to the south, you mentioned is 2.7 homes per acre versus the 1.9. Are there any wetlands or geographical features on that particular lot that would preclude you from developing?
No, we didn't have to address any wetlands or stream crossings or anything of that nature, if that's your question.
So are the lots essentially comparable sizes? You say you've got a homogeneous type neighborhood. Are the lots essentially the same size?
They're
for the new one?
relatively close, yes. Yeah, and the product that we would put there would be pretty much the same.
And that leads me to my second question. I know you'd mentioned the fiber cement. This one, I'm assuming, based on what you were saying, will not be fiber cement siding, and I'm assuming the one to the south is not either?
So the one to the south is not fiber cement. We're not obligated to that under the rezoning that we did do, but we always leave that as a client choice. We are a semi-custom builder, so we really have a broad spectrum of options that the client can choose, from bedroom sizes to garage sizes to finishes, and the exterior facades as well.
Thank you.
I got one more question.
Yes.
Is there any turning lanes out on the main road coming into here?
Not at this time. We would have to put a turning lane.
You'd have to put a turning lane?
Yes,
Coming in from the left,
both directions.
both directions?
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, bear with me while I go through my spiel. At this time, I would like to have all persons wishing to speak for or against tonight's agenda items who've signed up on the forms provided on the table outside of the meeting room. If you wish to speak on any agenda items but have not yet signed up, please let Amy know so we can have you added to the list. Got that right here. When your time comes to speak during the public comment period, please state your name, address, whether you're speaking in favor of or against this agenda item. You have exactly 3 minutes to make your comments. There'll be no exceptions. We'll notify you when there's 30 seconds remaining, and then again when 15 seconds remain. No extra time is allowed unless a board member has a question specifically to ask you, at which time you may respond to that question only. No person is allowed to give up their time to add to the time limit for another person. Once your 3 minutes are up, we ask that you be seated. Anyone continuing beyond their allotted time will be asked to return to their seat. Should someone continue beyond that request, they are deemed out of order and will be asked to leave. Many of the items we cover at these meetings may become contentious and emotions may run high. We ask that everyone remain civil, respectful, and professional at all times. At no time will be acceptable for anyone to disparage the board, applicant, or any speaker. Shouting, name-calling, or any other disrespectful behavior will result in being asked to leave or removed. These rules are in place to ensure a fair and productive meeting. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. That being said, public comments. The first gentleman on our list is Brad Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Brad Sellers. I am the town manager of the town of Wingate. I live in Wingate, 204 Smith Street, College Park. Been in Wingate 32 years. I'm here to speak on behalf of my town board. I'm here to speak against the rezoning case CZ 2021-003, also known as the Creech property. As was indicated in the staff report, True Homes did come to the town of Wingate asking to be annexed into the town. We chose not to annex. As you know, this property, while adjacent to our town limits, is just outside of our ETJ. To give you some background of our history with True Homes, we approved a new subdivision by True Homes over a year ago, known as the Glens. The Glens is one of the 2 subdivisions that will be adjacent to this proposed development. There will be 127 single homes in the Glens. Construction of this development has started. We also have an existing Glencroft development that was built some 17 years ago by Kraft Homes, who is known now as True Homes. There are 100 homes in this development. As was mentioned earlier in my comments, the town chose not to annex the property for many reasons, most importantly, trying to protect our sewer capacity. To that point, let me share with you what our town has approved in the way of new development. To date, we have approved 700 new single-family homes, 49 of which will be townhomes. This is an important aspect. This is a 70% increase in our growth. We have 1,100 dwellings in town of Wingate. So this is, for Wingate, this is a big deal. An important point that I would like to make is that we have entered into a development agreement with each of these developers in making sure that they build what we want, i.e. no vinyl, specific architecture, specific amenities, 2,000 to 2,400 square feet homes. We have enough starter homes that are in this targeted area that is before you tonight. Just across the bypass, we have approved a 217 home subdivision that has been annexed by Wingate. This is part of the 700 homes that I just spoke about, all being 2,400 square foot homes with hardy board siding, sodded yards, a swimming pool amenity, etc. This development, just like Glencroft and the Glens, will have Ansonville Road as its main access to our town and the bypass. The increased traffic is another negative concern that the town has with the proposed development. As was mentioned in the letter from our mayor to your board, the town is experiencing unprecedented growth. We are currently working with Wingate University on a large-scale downtown creation project that will encompass most of our interchange on the bypass and include most of North Main Street. We have secured $5.1 million from the state budget to help us install the needed infrastructure, i.e. water, sewer, streets. As you can see, Wingate is growing and we want to control our growth. I would respectfully ask that you deny the rezoning of this proposed development.
Thank you. Next in public comments, Thomas I can't read that last name, I apologize.
Good afternoon, board chair and rest of the members. My name is Thomas LeGrand.
LeGrand, thank you. Sorry about that.
I live at 424 Glencroft Drive. I am on the commissioner board in Wingate, but I am talking as a resident of Glencroft today. I'm gonna let you know that part. I've been in Glencroft since '06. In '06, I was 28 years old with a family, and that was my dream home. It was sold to me as a dream home. As I got there over a couple of years, it was undeveloped. Kraft Homes did not finish the project, went bankrupt, and I was left with I-4. Since then, I've been trying to improve, trying to fix the problem, got an annex. In the process, I became a commissioner, and at one time I decided to leave, but you don't leave a problem, you try to fix the problem. But therefore, the development agreement for Glencroft 2 was part of my idea, to try to put some stipulations on how things are gonna be built and not to be a knee-jerk and be safe for other people that was like me, buying a home for their family and would not be left with an eyesore. So therefore, Hardy Boards, the fixing of Glencroft 1 that he said they didn't have no affiliation with, but they decided to fix it, the roads, and we finally got amenities. As I look at the other development that comes from Taylor Street's gonna run through 3 divisions, subdivisions. Even though it's an emergency exit point, it's a congested point. We are at R20, our house is built at R20. I think there's an R6, smaller houses. And on the sketch, they did not talk about the size of the house, how it's gonna look. No buffering, talking about the wooded area, but buffering part of it. In the visual plan of the Glencroft 2, we had buffering that's separating the division, because he said we are not a whole division, it's separate. Now he want to put all of us together. But we can't be all together if we're supposed to have 3 different HOAs. I'm just confused on that part. So the houses are not gonna look the same, because Glencroft 1 has been not updated, not done correctly, but Glencroft 2 is gonna look better than Glencroft 1, but I'm okay with that. But what about part 3? We don't have no sketch. We don't know how big the house is gonna be, what they're gonna comply with. And as a resident, I'm scared. It's nothing holding them from doing to me in 2006 to the new family members. Gonna be a plan to live there with their family. So I'm confused and kind of emotional, because now I gotta walk, if it do happen, I have to walk out my backyard into somebody else's yard that's right there, no buffering, none separation. It's just congested, and I don't feel it's trustworthy with the developer. We have an agreement with part 2, but this right here, he went to the county because less stipulations.
Mr. LeGrand, your time is up,
Okay.
but I do appreciate your comments. This time, I'd like to encourage board discussion. Ms. Duda?
again, looking at the 2050 plan, and it's just been updated, and Bjorn showed us that obviously when it first got submitted, you know, it was deemed one way, but now it looks like we are trying to preserve some of the rural residential. I was a little amazed that it was going from, and I apologize, it's R20 to R6. That seemed like quite a movement, especially for the rural residential. I did ask about the gross versus buildable with the net, because I think we have, in Union County, have tried to start those stipulations to where we're trying to give folks a little bit more room. And why are the traditional housing disappearing in North Carolina, Union County? Why can't we have some of the housing, especially if there's more starter homes now that are going up, why can't we have some homes that have a little bit more room? So that's my comments.
Thank you.
You gonna go down the line or what?
We can. Mr. McNally?
This is a sort of a rare event since I've been on the planning board that it's sort of on my side of the county. So I'm familiar with the area a lot, and where this is positioned, it's between one development and I believe it's a mobile home development to the north of it, and then across the street are single-family homes as well that have been there, as Jordan said, have been there a while. So it fits right into a pocket here that it fits, even though it's supposed to be for the 2050 plan and a rural residential area, it does fit within the surrounding area. I think we do need, if they're going to be a little bit smaller, I think we do need a little bit more smaller houses that can be more affordable for people to live and work and be able to commute at this point, even if it's within Union County on the western side or even into Charlotte with the access of the Monroe Expressway. So I think it fits. I think we need some more affordable housing somewhere, and this is way out from Charlotte where people are going to commute. So they're going to have to use the expressway, or they don't have to, but I mean, it's accessible to them. And I think it fits the neighborhood, like I said, between the development that goes with them. So I'm okay with it. And we have the sewer capacity. That didn't seem to be an issue. The school system didn't seem to be an issue as well. So I don't have an issue.
Thank you.
And the one thing, though, is with the annexation with Wingate, they did say that, you know, the developer went to Wingate. Wingate admitted right here tonight that they rejected the annexation, but yet in the staff report, it says they prefer it to be annexed. So that's a bit confusing to me.
Vice Chairman Fisher.
Well, tying into what Mr. McNally said, I'm confused on a lot of this as to yay or nay or whatever the case may be. You know, in the 6-7 years I've been on this board, I've seen a lot of houses that you had schematics of it, you had the pictures of the siding, the roofs, and things of this nature. I believe I saw maybe 4 or 5 houses at the beginning of True's presentation. I still don't know what they're going to put in there to make sure that it's going to fit the ambiance of what the town plan is, et cetera. And I guess I could go on and on and on, Mr. Chair, but I've got to be up front with you. I don't have enough information to vote yes on this, so I'm voting no.
Thank you. Charlie, what say you?
I'm with Don. It looks a little bit, it also looks a little bit out of place. It's sandwiched in between 2 other subdivisions, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of distinction between them, but yet it's probably going to be some difference. I mean, the size of the homes, the size of the lots, going to be some difference, and nobody said anything about the size of the homes, what the square footage was going to be, and it's, I don't know. I don't the whole sewer thing is confusing to me too, so. I don't think I have enough information to go on right now.
Thank you. Patrick?
I have a question for the developer. On the opposite side of the street, there's 5 lots over there. Are they also included in this build?
We were contemplating pulling them into the HOA, but because of the disconnectedness, it wouldn't be fair for them to be paying dues for amenities that
But you're going to build over there 5 houses?
we would
on
be
that side.
building. They would have access to it, but they won't be subject to HOA criteria.
So they wouldn't be part of this development? They're separate from everything else?
Correct. Correct.
That's why they're so big compared to the other ones. The lot sizes are huge compared to these other ones.
Yeah, the lot size are distinct, correct. Yeah, I think initially we had those designed to be septic, that's why. And we just never changed it. 'Cause
They are septic, or are they going to be sewer?
Initially, when we were looking at everything, we were looking at keeping that independent, and we were looking at septic before we realized that we could tie into gravity. So we're just holding it as it is. There's no reason to change them. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Since I can I speak? Just mention
Sure.
a couple things. I wanted to do a little bit of rebuttal. The reference to the annexation and the sewer capacity. So I know the town had mentioned 2 points. I just wanted to really clarify, because I think there's ambiguity with a couple of you folks here, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page. When I met with the town, they, for the most part, wouldn't accept my application. So we never went through the formal process. So I just want to be clear that there was no rejection of annexation, because they wouldn't even accept my application. And then secondly, on the sewer capacity, I'm not sure why they're concerned when it has no impact on them. It's not their sewer. They don't manage the lines. This is straight through Union County to Monroe. So just to be clear that Wingate has nothing to do with the sewer on this specifically. And I think Mr. LeGrand had referenced something about the yards. We, as a general rule, as a company, sod 100% of the yard. We don't just put seeds. We actually bring in sod and sod the entire front and rear of the yards. And then from a screening perspective, we're very cognizant of that. We're very deliberate and intentional on keeping rear yards screened, especially on adjoining properties. So just because you see a lot line going there doesn't mean I'm going to clear up to the lot line. We don't need to clear up to that extent. So, and I think there was a reference also from the town on the ownership of Craft and True Homes. And I think, just for clarification purposes, there is one person who, and I'll mention his name, Dave Cuthbertson, was responsible for that Glencroft project. We as a company have 3 owners. 2 of them are active and 1 of them are just a financial. And Dave Cuthbertson is a only strictly financial owner of True Homes. He has no bearing on what we do. He has no bearing on what we have done in the past. We have been building in this area for the past 13 to 15 years. I invite all of you to look at our previous communities, our current communities, our website for future communities. We do not do what was done in Glencroft 1. That is not our methodology. We're here for the long term. Our backyard is Monroe. I mean, that's where our headquarters are. We're here for the long run. We put a good product. We want to be able to walk away and know that we put something nice on the ground. And we are subject to, just as a side reference, we do third-party independent surveys with our clients to make sure we're on track. And we have a very high rating, the way we process the homes and the way we deliver the homes. So I can personally say I'm proud to work for True Homes, and I'm proud of the products that we put on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Finn.
Hang on before you leave. I
Yes.
got one more question for you.
Sure.
If you look at the top of your lots, is there like 3 houses on the outside of your lot? If you're looking,
You talking right here?
yeah, Is there 3 houses there, and then there's an empty space, and then there's more house?
Yeah, so our property does not include that. It actually wraps around it.
So those houses are facing the road,
Correct.
and you're gonna put one house in the middle of those facing in?
No, we're not putting a house here.
There's no house there?
No.
But that's your property,
It is our property, but we're not putting a house there. Correct.
so that's just gonna be,
It'll just be vacant land.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Finn.
Thank you.
Mr. Berry, what say you?
My questions have been answered.
Well, that was easy.
You want my comments, I guess. Yeah, I don't get off that. We've known each other a long time. When I have unanswered questions, my answer is no. And I'm uncomfortable with the way this is sandwiched in. I respect the interest of the town, even though I'm not particularly in favor of ETJs. And as somebody mentioned earlier, those of us on the west are intimately familiar with rampant growth, and I have some anxiety about the sewer allocations by the time this comes out of the ground. And we're talking about 135 houses plus the other development, so it's 100,000 gallons a day probably getting in that line to Monroe when it's fully at full capacity. So yeah.
Mr. Patrick?
I'm going to echo some of the sentiments Robert had. I think it would fit within the context of the other adjoining communities. Definitely some more affordable residential development in that area could benefit it tax-based purposes. Doesn't, like Robert mentioned, seem that there are too many overarching roadblocks in terms of DOT, school, and capacities and the like. So I don't see a whole lot of reservation.
Thank you. For my comments, I feel that we have an obligation to the Board of County Commissioners to provide an opinion based on comprehensive plans, and we need to provide a product that they are 100% clear on what they're voting on. To that end, I do not feel as though we can move forward with this proposal given the limited information we have. We don't really have elevations, we don't have square footage, we don't have price range. There's still a question mark what the materials will be. And for that reason, I cannot recommend that we approve this to move forward to the Board of County Commissioners with a favorable vote. So this time I ask, is there a motion?
I make a motion that we deny as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of denying as presented? All opposed? Thank you. Bjorn, do you need to make any comments as far as how to proceed? Very good. Moving along, agenda item 8, subsection C, the Union County 2050 Implementation Committee updates.
Josh, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. We can hear you. So as your slide, I'll hand it over to you. So
Good.
I'm here tonight to provide an update to the planning board on the work of 6 implementation committees that were appointed by the Board of Commissioners in January to develop strategies for 6 specific issues that were identified in the comprehensive plan that would require additional analysis. And those committees have been meeting monthly since January, so we're effectively halfway through the process. It was a 6-month process for them to explore the issues, consider alternatives, and prioritize which strategies they would recommend to you possibly in July, and then ultimately to the Board of Commissioners. So kind of like what we did with the comprehensive plan process, there's a mid-plan feedback loop for both from the planning board and the county commissioners that gives you a heads up on what's being considered and allows them to receive your feedback to maybe adjust course if there are some strategies that maybe you aren't so fond of or would like to learn more about. So comprehensive plan was adopted last August. The process for these committees is that they will make a recommendation to you this summer. You can make your own position, either to recommend 100%, deny 100%, or have some sort of hybrid recommendation. Maybe there are specific strategies you don't like or wish they had added. Both motions, both recommendations are going to go to the county commissioners, both from the planning board and from the committees. And at that point, they can approve, deny, amend, or remand back if they want the committees to go do some more work. And so now through the rest of the spring, May through June, they're going to be finalizing the recommendations. The month of April is pretty pivotal because each committee has been given a survey of all these strategies where they've been allowed to anonymously provide their feedback on the different strategies, and they'll be digesting that in the month of April, which will probably cull down the list of strategies that ultimately get recommended. And so this month is very good to hear from the board, or the planning board, and from the Board of Commissioners that will allow them to really have a 360-degree assessment of what they want to take forth. So we're going to start with broadband. Lily is not here. I assume you're not online either. Let me look to make sure if anyone dialed in. No, it's just Josh. So I will speak for Lily. This committee's been probably the most active because they actually had to call a special meeting this month. The state and the federal government have been putting a lot of money into broadband initiatives, and the county commissioners and county management have been relying on this committee to make recommendations because broadband providers like the Spectrums, the Frontiers, the Verizons of the world even, can submit applications to expand broadband coverage into parts of the county with either very poor service or no service. And the applications will get more points if there's an active planning initiative within the county. This committee serves that role. And also whether money is put forth or resources. Like, for example, we have fire stations and telecommunications towers where if you could co-locate some of their infrastructure, it would help them with rollout. So either with in-kind or cash money committing to these applications, they can score better. And Union County has been very proactive. Actually, the applications were due this week, but because of the leadership of Union County, we were able to engage with our legislature and ask it to be delayed a month because there just wasn't enough time to get these applications analyzed. So that was done. This committee met and has made recommendations to the county commissioners. They were submitted to Chairman Rape this past week, and it's actually going to be on the county commission agenda in 2 weeks to analyze applications and what they consider their priorities. And this committee will then provide a round of feedback to them at the end of April, which will then go into the first meeting in May for the county commissioners to approve their commitments of either money or resources or just a letter of support for specific applications that are going to the state. So this is an issue where the county doesn't provide internet services. We're not a utility in that regard, but we are actively engaged in this process. So that's something in terms of committing money where this committee is very relevant. They're also looking at education on how to request system extensions. This is one of those kind of inside baseball things that we're learning about, that there may be fiber going down a road, but then there's a side road, and the telecommunications company won't extend it down that side road until a bunch of people complain and say, yeah, I want to get the service. And then that sends enough of a metaphorical signal for them to then extend the fiber down that road to pick up those customers. So part of this process is going to be about education. How do we reach out? It might be in a utility mailer or a tax mailer to explain to people in the more rural areas of the county, but also, frankly, any part of the county. We've heard from the city of Monroe as well that there are areas that don't have good service. They will be taught how to, if you're in this area, this is who you call, or if your telecom company is this provider, you can call and request service if you don't already have it. It doesn't mean you're automatically going to get it, but when they get enough of those calls, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and that's how the systems respond. And then also potential recommendations on subsidies for low-income households. That's already been done through Union County Public Schools, but it could be for households without kids in Union County Public Schools. We did hear from the school system on how they were it was just dumb luck that they were already set up for hot spots and whatnot to provide service to households to do remote learning, and then COVID happened and they were able to effectively respond. So that's the first committee. Does anyone have any questions about what broadband is considering, or what they're recommending to the county commissioners in the next few weeks? Okay, moving right along. Cluster standards in rural areas where water and sewer are present. Chairman is Nathaniel Grove. This is Nathaniel on, let me see. Nope. So I will have to speak for Nathaniel. This is honestly exactly what we just saw with the rezoning in Wingate. The current 2050 plan, compared to what it was before, says we want this area to remain rural residential. However, utilities are present. Doesn't make sense for you to have 40,000 square foot lots, if that's your base zoning, and put it on water and sewer. It's an inefficient use of land from a variety of perspectives. And so how do you craft cluster provisions that allow flexibility for the property owner and preservation of environmental resources, whether it's wetlands, streams, existing farmland, existing tree stands? So this committee is looking at lot sizes. What are the priorities for what to preserve? What's the minimum development size that should be considered under this program? What's the maximum that should be considered? You might say, well, why have a maximum? Well, what if you allowed it to be, say, 1,000 acres out in the middle of nowhere where there's no utilities? And yeah, the base zoning is 1 unit per acre, but now you could have 1,000 lots and you have a package plant in the middle of nowhere. That in 15 or 20 years, the fear is that it goes, it falls into disrepair, and then the county is left to maintain it. We have multiple examples of that already. That's an example where this committee may recommend an upper limit to the size of these types of developments that would be allowed. Conversely, they might have a minimum, the smallest size where this would be allowed. Maybe it's 5 acres, I don't know, but that's an example. They talked about lot sizes. Hypothetically, you could have an apartment complex in that property, and maybe you only disturb 4 acres, for example, and the rest is undeveloped. They didn't like that example either, so the current consideration is down to 8,000 square foot lots. Focus from an environmental perspective, the priority is on forests and streams, contiguous forests, so that you don't have fractured and fragmented environmental habitat for creatures. Density bonus may be recommended to incentivize this, because honestly, the mindset is we want these types of strategies to be the natural inclination, to not just strip the whole area out as 40,000 square foot lots, because what we've been told from a variety of stakeholders is that it ends up being 40,000 square feet of lawn and cut down forest and incremental degradation of resources. So that's the mindset here with this committee. Does anyone have any questions or comments? And Pam's very familiar with this. She serves on this committee.
Why would you need a density bonus if the bonus to the developers, in fact, you put less pipe in the ground, you put less roads out there? They're already getting the bonuses. It costs less money to develop the land in the first place with the cluster zoning.
I'm with you. We just heard feedback that sometimes inertia is a pretty powerful thing, and when you have a product and you can copy and paste, it's just easier.
Thank you.
Lee, you've dealt with plenty of clusters over the years. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. I think
Okay. So yeah, I completely understand. And you guys, this board, I'll say you guys, this board may elect to recommend no density bonus and say this is the right thing we should be doing. We should only allow this, for example, as opposed to making it an option. That's that's something that's within your purview. Moving right along, Litter Task Force, Michael's also not here. Michael is the chairman of the committee. This is the idea of, what do you do about roadside litter? And you're never gonna solve it. How do you move the needle? So some strategies are being considered. We actually heard from our counterparts in Lancaster County, South Carolina, who have Keep America Beautiful designation and have a full-time coordinator, deals with enforcement as well as obviously recruiting volunteers and outreach. And they actually do prioritization and assessment of their roads, and then essentially on a quarterly basis we'll say, okay, these are the segments of roads when we have our volunteer events, these are the sections we're going to go do. So you don't necessarily just volunteer a section of road, you're a volunteer or you have a group of volunteers and you get told these are the sections we're focusing on this quarter, sign up here and we'll meet up on such and such a date, and that's when we'll do that type of cleanup work. They also are considering making this committee a standing county-appointed committee, so they have more formal standing and can make recommendations. We have a former executive from a soft drink company, talked about the effectiveness of bottle deposit bills, the idea that pay a dime, turn your Coke can in, get your dime back. Education campaign in schools, kind of God and apple pie, teaching kids that litter's bad. And then working with the Sheriff's Department, we did have Sheriff's Department attend and talk about how they have done some investigations with county as well as with, in particular, the town of Indian Trail to identify illegal dumping sites. So, emphasizing that in terms of surveillance and penalties. So, any questions about that committee and its recommendations?
What happened to community service?
Community service is not cost effective, is what the feedback is. Either prisoners or just supervising it. I think if you have your 50 hours of community service, I think those things do happen. But in terms of like getting the prisoners out on a chain gang, it just has fallen out of favor because the numbers don't work. But yeah, community service is still something that happens. That's an eligible activity for picking up trash.
I was kind of going the same way, but I had a second question on that. It's one thing to have the education campaign in schools, and I don't know if this is happening or not, but is it possible to get the kids out there as an event? I didn't know if that had been discussed. It's one thing, you talk about it, but actually doing it's a different thing, so. It was just a question.
I don't know if we talked specifically about that. I kind of having.
I know like in Weddington, they have litter sweep, and a lot of the kids come from the high school because they need hours.
Yeah.
And they get signed off for their hours.
Yeah.
And then they're out there for like an hour, maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
Picking up trash on
Okay.
the bad roads.
Yeah, I just didn't know how it was in the school system.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that there isn't volunteer events that already happen, that there aren't plenty of people who pick up trash. There are. It's just the idea of strategically using that resource and to elevate it and to hopefully head it off with the illegal dumping and the surveillance. So it's a multi-pronged set of strategies.
Bjorn, are they doing anything to promote people that see these illegal dumping grounds to call the Sheriff's Department?
That would be part of that.
That's part of it? Okay.
That would be part of the
Thank you
illegal
very much.
dumping penalties and surveillance is education on who to call. And we do have code enforcement. We have environmental health. We look at it from a couple different perspectives within Union County, unincorporated Union County. Well, actually, environmental health would be all of Union County. So these things do happen in terms of, looking at it and following up with the property owners to have them clean that up. But it takes time. The feedback loop is not like the next day they go out and do it.
Isn't there a litter busters or something like that?
There is, and
See
at least 2 or 3 members of Litter Busters are on this task force. And this is not to take anything away from Loretta, but when you don't formalize things like this, those people burn out. So this is meant to formalize it.
Are they talking about covering loads? People going to the dump or going to the convenience sites?
That's-
Because it's a lot of I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of
that's
traffic
part of
moves
this, that's part of this in terms of the law enforcement. I should have expanded on the illegal dumping penalties and surveillance. Union County in the last couple of years doubled the cost for tipping fees if you bring your vehicle in without, your load secured. So, and the recycling coordinator is on this committee as well as a staff representative, so they're dialed in with that issue as well. All right, moving right along. Open space in rural areas, and we do have the chairwoman. Laura is here, and I will turn it over to her to talk about what this committee is doing.
Thank you, Board. Chairman, the board here, I have a similar task to the cluster. The only thing is we're open space in rural areas, so that we assume there's no water and sewer, so it'll be, we'll have some wells and septic on that. We are also very dialed into the fact that the land use map is a very important piece of information to use, as well as the 2014 comprehensive plan. There was a great deal of data that was provided on the amount of waterways, forest areas, agricultural areas, and to preserve the rural character and to minimize the impacts to wildlife. We are looking at a land use and comprehensive planning in our proposed ordinance language, and also including a development design guide that will help all involved. The developers too. We were looking at, in talking with a number of people, real estate, we understand that we need more homes, but we also know we want to preserve the rural integrity of Union County. And so we have been looking at tool guides. Both the NC State University has a conservation subdivision handbook, but more importantly, the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission has a green toolbox planning program that I have gone through all the webinars for that, but we also have them speaking with us at our April meeting. But we are also have been looking at other areas, Randolph County, Chatham County. The town of Davidson has similar ordinance language. So we are looking at all of that, and then we'll be providing a summary to you of what our findings are on that. And if I could address the question about why you would incentivize on density, we were looking at it as in a holistic manner. And so with our 40, if we had a 40-acre lot, 1 acre per lot, there's only 40 lots. Well, if they have to set aside a certain amount, what can we incentivize? So we even had, at our last month's meeting, Environmental Health talking to us about septic and well requirements. In order to not fragment habitats, but instead, if they're giving up some of that land, can they have a few extra lots at a smaller size, as making sure, though, that the science works either in a group septic or on the individual septic. So that bonus is to incentivize them that there's benefits to green development and making it a pleasant place for all, but also just, I think knowledge is power in talking about, with development, we have a need to protect the wildlife, and there's so much using native plants and such that if we do mass grading, we lose the pollinators, or we lose certain plants that were there to be food sources for our insects and our plants and animals here. So, you guys have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman Varela.
I think I can speak to that a little bit from a development background, grading, utility. I know right now the cost for what we're seeing in our proposals to our clients is roughly somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 per lot cost on a 50 to 70 foot lot, roughly. So that's just construction costs. So then you've got your land, you've got design, you've got permitting. You get done with it, and they're looking at $120,000 a lot cost. Well, we want to talk about affordable housing. Well, how are we going to build affordable housing when the lot's costing the developer $120,000 a plug, flat out? So, the old rule of thumb was you would take the cost of the lot, multiply it by 5, and that's the cost of the house. Now, that's changed a little bit because the cost of land's gone up, and it's changed a little bit because the cost of material. So I don't really know that figure really works anymore. But I know that as a general rule now, a lot of these national builders are going in, and if they make 3 to 5% on the lot, they're happy. They're extremely happy. If they break even, they're okay. They're going to make their money back on the house that they built. So with going in with septic systems, for instance, we've done several neighborhoods where we go in and we've mass graded the whole neighborhood, and at the end of the day, they're getting, say it's a 40-acre piece, and they're ending up with 25 lots after the septic layouts and whatnot. They're still having the same cost in that lot as they would that 40 or 50 foot lot, plus having to dig a well, plus having to put in septic tanks. And then, with that being done, they're having a harder time padding out the lot where they can get it flat so they can go in, and you've got your septic tank in the backyard. You've got to have the 50 or 100 foot separation from your drain field to your well. And then they got to build that within those constraints. So, I think from a development standpoint, there's going to have to be some major incentive to want to reduce the lot size. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the issue of just continue to drive up the cost of housing.
What about, and Pat and I were just talking about it, but in Lake Providence, we have 2 lots that are set aside that have 7 drain fields in it, where the individual lots didn't perk, so they pumped it over and they took a whole field that just became a septic field.
Well, that happens a lot, but I think what you end up with there is you end up with a nightmare because you have this right-of-way you've got to dedicate through everybody's yard to be able to pump it to a drain field. Okay, we've got 20 pipes, 2-inch lines pumping to a D-box and drain fields, and we have, somebody goes out there, plants a tree, and cuts 10 of them, and we don't know for 2 or 3 days, and you got 5 houses with backed up wells, and we're out there trying to figure out who in the heck do all these pipes belong to? Because, you start hooking those things up, well, you guys got to be sure that you're hooking to the right line, to the right drain field, because if this drain field's for 3 bedrooms, and then this drain field's for 5 bedrooms, and you hook them backwards, well, you really got a mess. So I think it's a good idea. It's done. Smithfield over in Unionville is done like that. It worked pretty good, but at the same time, we cleared and graded a good many of those lots in there, and at the same time, it's been a mess at times too for those homeowners. And if you get an issue in your yard, it kind of ends up like a public right of way. Somebody's out there digging in your yard, trying to figure out why their system's messed up.
Like Daniel said, they're the same in my neighborhood too.
Yeah.
We have 92 lots and there's 7 lots that are set aside because some of the lots don't perk. So those are all septic fields.
Yeah.
And there's like anywhere from 3 to 7 septic fields on each one of them.
Yeah.
And I think what they do is they run them down the street,
Mhm.
and then where the septic fields are, they cut them in. So they're not in anybody's yards and stuff.
Yeah, they run within the public right of way.
Yeah.
Does the current code require a tracer line above?
Yeah, well,
for-
you put a tracer, yeah, you could put a tracer line on them, but when you cut a tracer line, you don't know what you're hooking back up to.
Yeah.
You know, we hit tracer wires all the time, and as long as it's the only tracer wire in that ditch, you're okay. But if there's a tracer wire for every piece of pipe in that ditch and you hit it, you don't know what you're connecting back to. That
Yeah.
makes any sense.
I guess the reason I brought that up is you would think they would call 811 first, and if they didn't,
Well, 811's not gonna locate that, because that's private. They're only gonna locate anything that's,
you got a point there.
yeah, so it's gonna be on each homeowner to hire a private locator at that point to locate that line.
One of the things we are suggesting is a comprehensive planning, like a sketch plan, just to talk to the table, say what, are there clusters, as well as when you look at a certain specific site, what perks, what doesn't perk. Set aside the stuff that doesn't perk, and you put homes there, or homes in the area that does perk. I think there can be, with more knowledge shared and the right flexibility in the language, to be a win-win situation. But I know if we just mass grade, we have issues with stormwater. And so if we can minimize the grading, keep the native soils, as well as if we can protect some of the mature canopy, that also not only makes the future homeowner happy, but also the neighbors in the other properties, in the surrounding areas too.
Yeah.
But
So I think-
these are very good pieces. I'm taking notes, and this is
So
something.
for a typical lot, you need, it needs to be about 40,000 square feet, 200 by 200, 0.92 of an acre, to house a septic and a well, right?
Well, that's the zoning. We heard from environmental health at Laura's meeting where they talked about the ideal, like if things were perfect, you could do it in a half an acre.
Plus there are these
but-
reducers.
But then they talked about the opportunities for common wells that, multiple home sites can draw off of, as well as common drain fields that can serve multiple homes as well, in order to take advantage of areas that do perk versus areas that don't. However, like in Patrick's situation, you still have the large lot size. And if you're talking about the rural areas where you're trying to preserve the rural character and resources, having the smaller lot size itself with the other areas left undisturbed, you get those environmental benefits that she was alluding to.
Now, I wish I did pump off.
What's that?
I said I wish I did pump off now.
Well, this is some good discussion. I guess in the interest of moving things along, though, we'll go ahead and proceed.
And we have Monica, very patient, chairwoman for the school siting committee, so I'll hand it off to her.
Good evening, everyone. Before you look at our recommendations, I'll let you know that we did have a presentation by the NCDOT, and we looked at a number of schools sort of from a bird's eye view to get an idea of what really works and what doesn't work. And this is just coming from moms driving to school and people that are in the community. And so by looking at that, we really like the idea of more than one driveway to a school, having multiple access points for a million reasons, but strategically emergency and traffic flow, and to assist with getting more of that, what do you call it, stacking, so that we can get people off of those tiny little 2-lane roads that we have around here. And then requiring more access than just from one road. For instance, Weddington being able to access the school from different perspectives, the way that schools, you can have a kid walk over to the elementary school, and pick them up in a different way, and that's generally accepted. So just being able to get at the schools from different perspectives, different angles. And we, as a committee, are leaning toward, we like the special use permit over the flat out by right, which we have now, or at least the by right with some requirements or additional recommendations. and also increasing the buffering between the school site and the property. I guess mostly we just really want to, we understand that we heard from the school district guys, the contractors, the guys that have been doing this, and we understand that they need flexibility in their ability to build. Sometimes it's rural and sometimes it's urban, and so our recommendations need to fit all of those perspectives, which is a bit challenging, as you know very well. But what we would really like to make sure we take into consideration, because there will likely be no more public schools built for a long time, but more public and charter, then that we are honoring the folks that live in those communities when we have those facilities that are being built. And so the biggest issue I believe our committee sees with school siting is traffic. Small little roads, and a lot of people during lots of time, specific times. I have photos of a FedEx truck today going on head-on traffic, turning in a crazy way. This is Deal and Weddington. So yes, it was raining, crazy pickup today, but traffic can get very crazy around some of these public schools and other charter schools too. And we have young drivers, so there is a lot of concern about traffic and the impact of traffic around these areas. And so we think that schools that are coming into an area should make the necessary traffic improvements. And so as we understand, it used to be that way, and now DOT has to pay for those improvements. And we would like to propose starting the talk around legislation that puts it back on a developer or a school, our committee is a school, to take on those improvements. So if they want a school in that area, then they have to make the necessary improvements to make sure that they can handle the traffic and that it's safe for everyone.
Any questions?
What do you think?
I love your passion, and it sounds like this has been thought out very well. So thank you, Chairwoman Schrader.
Yep, you're welcome.
The last is Josh Allen, who has been able to sit at home and wait for this portion of the presentation. Josh, are you still on?
Yep.
All right, Josh,
Yes, sir.
the floor is
Thanks,
yours.
Bjorn. Thank you for allowing me to be virtuoz and daddy duty tonight. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for allowing us for a moment to talk with you guys, to give you an update on where we are, where we've been, where we're going. I'm the chair of the Stormwater Committee, and really our plan ultimately is to bring Union County's stormwater standards up to more acceptable industry standards, and then also identify or help to remediate some specific issues that are occurring in and throughout the county. So generally, in terms of improving stormwater standards, we're looking at, there's that fine line of, we want to increase stormwater standards in a way that we're protecting existing infrastructure, we're reducing flooding throughout the county, but we're also not scaring away development. We're putting this structure in place that's going to help to mitigate those impacts as part of or associated with the increased development that we're anticipating in Union County over the next 20, 30 years. So a lot of those things that we've considered are, increasing detention requirements, meaning they have to hold more water on site for longer before they release it to, the downstream receiving stream or property. Increasing buffers on streams. There are also some adopting the Mecklenburg County has a stormwater design manual for all stormwater control measures. So being like, stormwater basins, ponds, wetlands, fire retention areas, that sort of thing. They have a very good design manual for those and actually most municipalities in the Charlotte metro area use that same design manual. So we would just be kind of coming up to the same standards that everyone else is using in the area. Another thing that we've looked at is isolated flooding areas. So there would be regulation or ordinance in place such that if a development is being permitted or applied for, and there is a known downstream area of flooding, that, you know, and we have some good data from Hurricane Florence and Matthew and Michael that, you know, where these areas occur, you know, that they would be held to a higher standard, or they would have to provide analysis and data that would show that their development is not going to make that flooding concern worse than it already is. Additionally, one thing that's kind of outside the box that we're looking at as a committee is trying to create incentives for residential developers to not mass grade their you know, as much, or if they mass grade, maybe, you know, and bring that topsoil back into the site, you know, after the site's been graded, because through my experience as a civil engineer and you know, doing permitting and you know, working with projects in pre-development, post-development, and then way, you know, after construction, when developers and mass grade these sites and then they just lay sod down, it tends to, those areas that are counted as open space tend to actually function less like open space and more like an impervious surface. So meaning there's more runoff coming off of those surfaces than what is anticipated through the calculations for the site. So trying to come up with ways to incentivize developers to do that less, or just do it more responsibly in a way that, you know, or maybe if they do have to, you know, mass grade a site, then, you know, there are we hold them to a higher standard again in the calculations they would have to provide. So we've met with so far some of the local towns here in Union County. We've met with City of Marvin. We have also I personally met with some other consulting firms, you know, peers, colleagues of mine that, and just interviewed them. You know, there's one firm that called McAdams Company. They do a lot of development in Union County, and so I just asked them, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see changed? You know, if we instituted these things, what would your clients, how would they react? And so just getting as much information, as much feedback as possible. And then finally, we're actually going to meet, I think, in April with Union County Soil and Water to try and come up with some ways of incentivizing the retrofitting of existing facilities. So a lot of the facilities, you know, in Union County are either designed by under very old standards and old design methods, or they're just poorly maintained. And so, can we come up with an incentive program such that, you know, they're retrofitting those, bringing them up to current standards, you know, improving the design and functionality of those things to just overall improve the way the stormwater is managed within the county. Bjorn, that's about all I had to say. Are there any questions?
I don't believe so. Chairman Allen, I appreciate your time this evening.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Well, that worked well. So that's the first 3 months of work for these committees. Like I said, this month's kind of pivotal. We're going to hinge. They've done a lot of research between you and the Board of Commissioners and their own internal survey. They're going to probably whittle this list down a little bit and then come up with the final document, hopefully in June, so that as early as July, but often the summer's kind of inefficient, so maybe August, it'll go to you for a review. And either, you know, tonight, offline, you can attend their meetings. They're all a hybrid, so you can either attend in person or virtually, and I can send you the website where we have all of their links. You can click in and follow along with these meetings. They're all open to the public, but this is really important stuff, and in 3 or 4 months, it's going to be coming back to you.
Bjorn, thank you for your efforts on all this. That brings us to item number 9, the planning staff report. Good evening, Mr. Jensen.
I know, you're gonna make it short.
We'll see. I always like to regroup on rezonings. So the board actually considered 2 rezonings last night that the planning board recommended approval on. Steel Point, if you'll recall, that's up near Stallings. It's an expansion of an existing industrial facility, about 200,000 square feet. And the board held the public hearing last night, and they also chose to go ahead and take action last night, and they approved it unanimously. The second rezoning request was, call it the Rory rezoning. That's
exactly it.
Mr. Rory has an existing storage facility out off a secret shortcut road, and he wanted to expand that to allow some open storage of RVs, boats, etc. And the Board of Commissioners conducted a public hearing on that last night. There was no opposition, chose to go ahead and take action, and that was also approved unanimously. And this board recommended, I believe unanimously, both of those projects. Second topic I wanted to talk about was public records. It's been a recent topic we've all had. So really the simplest way to put it is any record that you may have related to a topic that comes before this board would be considered a public record. That would include really important emails you may get. Some of them aren't as important. If you get an email from Amy, for example, you didn't create that public record. You're not the custodian of that public record. Amy is. Obviously, if Amy sends the email to you, we have a copy of it. Really what we're looking at is public records that you may get from people in the community. So as board members, you may from time to time get emails from folks, letters from folks. People know you personally, they may send you a text message. And if it's about a topic that's coming before you, it's a public record. I have to maintain myself. If I get text messages that are on my personal phone from anyone, I have to make a copy of those and put them in a Word file and save them. And that's usually what I do. Same holds true again for appointed boards. So if you get emails from folks, it's always best to err on the side of safety. If you get emails from folks, the easiest thing to do, I would say forward them to Amy. That way we can take that email, we can scan it, save it, put it in the file that it's associated with. That way if there's ever a records request, we have it. We don't have to come ask you for it. Same thing with text messages. So anybody have any questions about public records?
Is there, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, absolutely.
Having been down this road, the challenge you have to my colleagues is a FOIA request, and when they make the request, they have the right to access your entire directory in your email. So if you're getting government emails into your personal Gmail account and there's litigation, the plaintiff's attorney has the legal right to access your email. So my comment, given the earlier emails that flowed this week to Lee, was can we get a union.gov, excuse me, faux pas, the government email address. So then it's it's automatically in your record retention program, and we don't have to.
And I think we have asked that question before, and I believe it is possible for us to get county email addresses for the board. We will, if that's something the board would want to do, we can double check on that to make sure. You just have to make sure to use those in official communications.
I think that would be a good idea, given what Mr. Berry just brought to light.
Yep, we will look into it then.
And replies to all are not a good thing.
But that's true, yes. And it's always a good rule of thumb. I know it's hard to control, because if you know someone and they have your phone number and they want to send you a text message, they're going to do it. Best practice is try to stay away from text messaging official business. That's all. Phone calls are a little bit different because that's not a written record. There's that's a phone call. You talk to somebody on the phone. If you're ever It's unlikely that a member of the planning board would ever be subpoenaed or something like that, but
If
if
you
you were.
take notes,
If you take notes, that's public
That's right.
record. That's right. If you write it down, it's public. If you're ever subpoenaed and somebody knows about a phone call, it's best to kind of remember what you said, but technically a phone call is not written, so. But we'll look into the email addresses and get back to you on that. Another point, a topic, this came up from a conversation I had actually over email with Pam, and I think this might be a good topic. We've got a lot of new members on the board, and it's always good to have a refresher as well. We have a lot of changes in the ordinance. If the board's interested, my conversation with Pam was really centered on how certain types of development processes work and how certain developments work and how those are reviewed. So it may not be a bad idea from time to time to almost have like a planning 101 to talk to the board about how we could pick a topic in the ordinance and we could do a presentation on that. Of course, nights like tonight where we have a loaded agenda may not be the appropriate time to do it, but if we have a light meeting or nothing on the agenda, we could always convene and talk about those things. So I just wanted to throw it out there for the board to think about, chew on, and get back to me on maybe some topics you may want to talk about in the future. Bjorn, did you want to?
Is that an email or a text?
I would prefer email. Bjorn, did you want to talk about this?
Sure. This site that I have up is from the county planning website. It's under about planning, zoning, and development. We have an interactive website that we've maintained for several years where we put all of our rezonings on there. This is a publicly accessible site. You can click on any one of them. And I'll bring up this one right here because we dealt with it today, and tomorrow morning I will go and update it. So it gives all the information about it. What's the existing land use, what's it being proposed for, when it was proposed, acreage, staff recommendation, we recommend approval. Tomorrow I'll update this, I'll say a denial. It'll go to the county commission, they'll do something. This is when we put in the numbers, this is what was initially proposed for. It's since gone down, we just put in the initial proposal. We will update these as new information becomes available, and the map is interactive so that these graphs will change as you loop in on different areas. So it's kind of cool. It's shareable, so take this map, share it with anyone. It's only as good as what people use it for, and that they're aware of it. So definitely share it with people because we get calls all the time. Has something been proposed there? Is a rezoning there? If it's not on this map, it's not a thing. People talk with us every day about rezoning. There's probably 10 that call for every one that, probably more like 20, that call for every one that comes across our desk with a check for $400 or $500. So you guys, this board I'm sure gets beat up about that as well. You can refer people to this. If it's not on this map, it's not a real rezoning through Union County. And that's all I have on this topic.
I do want to give Bjorn and Matthew Ray, our other, Bjorn's a senior planner. He's over the long-range planning program, and Matthew's planner in the long-range planning section. I want to give kudos to those guys. They created this. This was done in-house, but in addition to this, they've also done some ArcGIS online dashboard type maps that they undertook the task of taking every single minor subdivision that's ever been done in Union County, which was like 4,400 and some change. Most of those were paper. Putting them in a dashboard. Now, we didn't scan every single one because I don't know that the county has that much data. Now, I think IT might get mad at me. But you can click on every single one. You can find out basic information about that. They also did all the past rezoning. So there's another dashboard that shows rezonings from about 1968 up until 2016. All special use permits that have ever been done, and they are interactive dashboards just like this. So that was a huge undertaking, and they did a great job. So if you're ever on our website, you want to take a look at them, they're out there. Open them up and spend, if you're interested in stuff like that, you can be like me and sit there for a couple hours and
something like this is good for the public, because so many people, say, oh, what are you guys doing? It's like, well, it's not us, it's the town. The town's approving it or denying it, whatever.
And let me show you something in here. If you zoom in, municipal boundaries show up, so you can see where we are and where they are, which is sometimes helpful as well.
This is fantastic because for somebody like me that likes numbers and crunching, because this to me helps build the statistics, which helps with the information, the facts. So when you go to make a decision, like when we talk about schools and stuff, or is that going to impact a school and stuff? So when you can visually see, okay, where are they, and collectively, holistically, then you can say, oh, okay, now I can see that. You know what I'm saying?
But also how it's going to affect the other towns around you, too.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. Great job.
Excellent resource.
Yeah.
And great work. Please do share this, though. You'll save these folks a number of phone calls every day, make their lives a little easier. All right. Well, that being said, we move on to item number 10, brief comments. Start with you, Ms. Duda.
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to yourself and the board because I always think I'm eligible to vote, and I was voting on something I wasn't supposed to vote on when we were originally having that conversation. So I apologize. I get very passionate about this whole thing, so I want to apologize to the board about that. So, but other than that, I as usual, it's always a pleasure working with you all, and I learn a lot every time.
Thank you. We appreciate the passion. Mr. McAteer.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I've lived in Union County all my life, so this is a pretty cool opportunity to get to be a part of it. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank y'all for welcoming me tonight. So.
Mr. McNally.
I have nothing.
Vice Chairman Fisher.
Just want to welcome the two new members, and glad to have you on board. And Louis, we wish you the very, very best as you go forward. Safe travels to Florida. And when you get down there, get Disney straightened out, okay? All right.
Mr. Griffin.
Welcome to the two new members, and thank you, Louis. Don't get skeeter bit too much down there.
Mr. Harrison.
Same thing. Welcome to the new members, and Louis, good luck. Your wife.
She got bored.
Mr. Berry.
Thank you. It's an honor to serve with all of you and serve the citizens of Union County. Y'all been very gracious in welcoming and putting up with me tonight, and I look forward to what's to come. Thank you.
And Mr. Patrick.
I won't keep us here any longer. I'm good.
All right. Well, I will close by saying, first off, thank you to our two alternates, Ms. Duda and Mr. Patrick. I appreciate your continued attendance and, as always, your input. And again, I would like to welcome our new members. I do appreciate the fresh perspectives. And around here, anything, any opinion, any discussion is welcome. We love the different perspectives, and don't be shy speaking up. Don't feel like you necessarily need to be called upon. We encourage that dialogue. So welcome.
It's a good thing.
And Louis, you will be missed.
Thank you, sir. I'll miss all y'all too.
That being said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There you go. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. It is 9:33. We are adjourned.